Hey all, and thanks for taking a break from your day and joining us for a CX moment. This weekly series is where we chat with companies about what's happening with their business, their support centers, and with their customer experience. I'm Sarah Reed from Zendesk, and today we're talking with Ali Rayl, the VP of Customer Experience for Slack. You likely already know Slack, are using Slack, or are considering them because in a pretty short period of time, they become ubiquitous when referring to team collaboration and communication. And they're also known for their very outstanding customer support. If you have any questions for Ali, and I think many of you will, just go ahead and put them in the Q&A, and we're gonna do our best to get to them all. So let's get started. Hey Ali, it's so good to see you again.
I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
How the heck are you these days?
I'm good. I'm in San Francisco. The weather is absolutely amazing right now. I'm all stocked up on toilet paper. I get to wear yoga pants every day. I really can't complain.
There are some nice benefits to this. Uh,
Yes.
I think we're all feeling that, but there's also a lot going on recently.
Yeah, there is.
How are your customers feeling these days?
You know, um, it's been interesting talking to our customers. There's a spectrum of how they're feeling. On one end of the spectrum, it's people who have never had to work remotely. They've never considered working remotely. And they're in this place of going like, oh crap, I have to figure this out right now. And it's not just about business as usual, but remote. Like a lot of companies are having to pivot their business models overnight to figure out how to continue to be in business right now. Sort of next in the spectrum is folks who have they're using Slack, but they're mostly just using it for like direct messages and gifts. And they're like, okay, we need to use this for real as a business tool now. So they're trying to figure out how to evolve their usage. And then kind of all the way on the other end of the spectrum is companies who have been really sophisticated users, but realizing that there's something new in their business environment that they need to adapt the tool to do even more for them. And really, no matter where they are on that continuum, we're doing our best to get them to where they need to be as quickly as we can. And the good thing about Slack is that it is really adaptable. It is really flexible. So through these one-on-one conversations with people, we are able to give them, really good tactical advice to help them get the benefit they need out of the product.
Do you think you're actually getting to know some of your customers better in this time period because you're having a lot more of those one-on-one conversations?
Yeah, we're absolutely getting to know them better. We've done over 1,000 of these one-on-one conversations
Wow.
thus far, and there are so many stories from people, and it's not just the customer experience team, it's all across Slack doing it. Like you're just as likely to get our VP of finance or our CFO as you are a support agent doing these consults. Um, and everybody's coming back with stories. They're like, I just talked with Sarah at this company and they had this really interesting use case. And there's also a lot of talk within Slack. Like I suggested that she do this. Is that the right option? And people will be like, that's a good one. They could also try this. Like we're often doing a lot of collaboration and follow-up to figure out what is the best thing that we can offer to this specific person.
So let's touch on some of those stories because I've been reading a few of those. A lot of them are really inspiring of how people are utilizing Slack. I recently read the story from Nextdoor where they made Slack their digital headquarters after transitioning everybody work from home like all of us are having to do. And then Twitter hosted their first all hands crisis response through Slack, which I thought was fascinating. Give me a story that sends you into that mindset of, damn, this is why we do what we do, because this is so cool.
Yeah, this is a really amazing moment for us. We're extremely lucky. One thing I've been telling my team is like right now most people there's just not a lot of agency. Like we can all wash our hands and wear a mask and cover our mouths and stay home, and that's really about it. But as Slack, we have more to contribute right now. Like we are playing a much more prominent role in how people get through this, because we have the ability and the opportunity to connect people to one another and to the things that they need to get done. And some of the most like interesting and gratifying stuff is the like the things that have emerged directly in response to the crisis. So we are seeing people from all around the world spin up new Slack workspaces to work together on something. And that something could be research into the virus. We have teams where they're working together to sequence the genome. It's groups of 3D printer enthusiasts working with 3D printer manufacturers, trying to figure out how to manufacture ventilators. It's countries organizing their own hackathons. And so a lot of these, they're not business and they're not business adjacent. They are simply teams of people trying to figure out how to get work done together and coming to Slack to get that done. It's really, really amazing to be in a place where we can be like, yeah, Slack can support you in this. What do you need from us? Let's get you going.
I like that people are really thinking differently about their Slack usage. And there's a question that just came in from Austin who asked, how are your leaders supporting that? How do you encourage your leaders to likewise think differently and then encourage their teams to think differently?
It's an interesting one. So, one of the things about leadership is you just feel like you're repeating yourself over and over again, but it's really important because that message needs to reach a lot of different people in a lot of different venues. But in this remote world, those venues are collapsed. Like, you no longer have the ability to walk around and talk to people. You no longer have the in-person meetings. And so it's, one thing about the way that we're using Slack now is that it's a singular message that everybody sees. So we're making sure that we take advantage of our channel structure, our announcement channels. We're highlighting the things that really need to be highlighted. And first and foremost, in everything we're communicating to our employees is like, please take care of yourselves, take care of your family, do what you need to do. We're making sure that people are taking time off. And then, beyond that, once we have a healthy employee base and we maintain a healthy employee base, then there are all these opportunities in front of us to tackle. And those opportunities are the ones I just talked about. It's businesses transforming to suit the moment, and it's, teams of people aggregating and coming together to find something to do. And, leadership and management is just really interesting right now. You can no longer manage by observation of, like how the work is done. You have to monitor by output. Like, you're just looking at what is being produced by people rather than how they're producing it. And I think, these are just interesting kind of leadership shifts to make, which is how do we communicate people about how we are evaluating them, what we expect of them. And again, that top line expectation is take care of yourself.
So let's pivot for a second into the support organization,
Mm-hmm.
because metrics and productivity and all of those things are super important to all of us from an operational perspective. And I love what you're talking about also marrying that humanity up against that productivity. How have you communicated to your frontline individuals around that? Because I would expect they're having to, empathy is now more important than ever before, and they're having to become more empathetic with their customers. Is that something you're training for? How do you measure that? Like, how do you help them get there?
We've always been a pretty empathy heavy organization. It is like literally one of our company values that like you'll find it on our career site, for example. But, I am aware, and anybody who does support knows that there is a fair amount of emotional labor that goes into this. So everybody is dealing with the emotional, fallout of dealing with this personally and within their families, but also with the emotional weight of people coming to us and needing help. And we have seen, customers are coming to us much more emotionally charged than they used to be because they have a desperate need, and they're not, they're not angry or anything. They are just kind of scared, honestly. They're scared because they can't communicate. They're scared because they don't know what to do. That's a good opportunity to kind of transform that empathy, though, because it's not just like, yeah, I hear you're scared, but it's like, you're scared, but we can help. So again, this goes back to agency. It really helps. And talking about metrics, we drive a lot of metrics, as does everybody. The ones that I look at most closely in general are our first response time and our total resolution time. Our volume has increased massively. Tons of new users means, tons more tickets.
Right.
And we've had to be a little more judicious about where we apply those metrics. if somebody can't log into Slack, we still care about the first response time. We still care about resolving that quickly. If somebody has a thought or a feeling about pixel width in the sidebar, that's not going to get our normal first response time treatment, and that just has to be okay right now. Given my experience getting support myself right now, I think that that's just kind of how everyone's operating. It's an expectation and people get it.
I think one of the positive effects of this is that a lot of us are becoming more patient because we are living the experience right along with the companies that we do business with, which is a very unusual place to find ourselves in. Usually it may be isolated to a geography or it's isolated to an organization, but to have the entire world go through something at once is teaching us a few things that are good. Can you remind me where your support organization lived prior to all of this? Were they physically in a space, or were they spread out across the or at home or in other locations?
We've always had a few people who are fully remote, work from home, but for the most part, our department is in offices. People are spread out across 7 different offices in 5 different countries. So now they're working from home, close to 7 different offices in 5 different countries.
And do you think that you might keep them at home after this is over? Is it working out?
It is. I mean, it's working out for some people and not for others. And I think one important thing for all of us to remember as we look at our current situation is, like, people are not working remotely. This isn't proper remote work. This is working from home during a crisis. When people go to an official remote work capacity, they generally have like an office and a setup, and they make sure their internet connection is solid. And if they have a young kid, they have childcare. Like, they're actually set up to be successful as remote workers, which nobody really is right now unless it happened to be there already. So I don't think that we know enough yet to say, like, remote work is or is not working. We know enough to say, like, we are managing through a crisis in which remote work is not optimal but mandatory. We're looking at it closely. We're going to figure it out. I'm really excited, honestly, for all the research we're going to see about remote work in probably 6 months' time. It's going to be cool.
I agree with you on that. We were chatting earlier, and I have been a remote worker for the greater part of 8 or 9 years. And this is teaching me a lot of things that I may not have been quite so. I don't think I was as empathetic to others either on the other side as I am now. So it's a good thing. But how are you helping your agents in particular adapt to their work from home environment, and adapt to some of the pressures that they're probably going through, which is different than being in an office next to a group of people that they could commiserate and converse with and feel and walk through challenges with?
Yeah, obviously Slack is the connective tissue of Slack. One thing that we've seen is that, even before this started, people were very good about reaching out, not just within their office, but also across geographies, just for like casual meetups. There are lots and lots of people within my department who just have like weekly or monthly coffee chats because they just like to talk and catch up. We have a lot of like social channels in Slack. I'm sure that many people on this call, there are 420 of you, congratulations, are playing Animal Crossing right now, for example. We have an Animal Crossing channel in which, nobody's commuting anymore. So at 8 a.m., everybody can pop on and talk about their turnip prices. Like, there's a lot of social glue that already existed that we're leaning on pretty heavily for folks. And that's not just agents, but it definitely includes them. And I think beyond that, so there's, the stresses of being disconnected, the stresses of being alone and working from home. There's also the stress of just the volume of work that we're going through right now. It's pretty extra. And we basically spent last year retraining the organization to be adaptable. And that was all about really acknowledging and highlighting the fact that the people who know the work best are the ones doing the work, and they should be empowered to make changes as they see fit to improve it. Obviously we didn't foresee this in our future, but it's just been extraordinarily useful in that they can come together as a team and say, this is really hard, what can we do to fix it? And they can make those changes.
Are you making any new product decisions based on our new work from home environments?
We're not, and it's been interesting. Like we have had these conversations about, is there anything that we did in our product that is not appropriate for this moment? But it's working fine. I think, one thing about our company, we started as a video game company and pivoted to Slack in 2012. And we had a bunch of, like, we had our game design studio in Vancouver, engineering in San Francisco, a couple of folks on the East Coast. So when we moved over to Slack, like the geography didn't change. We still needed this tool to communicate across geographies. So built into this thing from the time when we were 8 people was this, reality of connecting across geographies. One thing that we did do though, we'd been working for a while on a refresh of our UI,
Mm-hmm.
and we were, very, very close to getting it out the door when this all hit. And we had to have this conversation like, is this the right time to change the interface because people are relying on us? Like we will be changing muscle memory, for example. And we went back to our research and we said, okay, this is undoubtedly, unquestionably better for new users. Like it makes more sense. They get more value out of it. And it's also better for our tenured users. They find all of the rich productivity features that we'd squirreled away in menus for the last 5 years, and they start using them and they start getting more out of it. So, it was a tough conversation, and we're like, we should actually accelerate this rollout. We should get this into more hands as quickly as we can because it's going to be better. So we're just lucky to have that kind of in our back pocket and able to accelerate it.
You talked a bit about, all these new users who are coming in, and, what's their learning curve like? Is that changing how your support organization is built? Because you have, I would assume, a much larger influx of new users than perhaps us existing users have questions.
Yeah, it's more but not different. So more new users or more people having questions. That learning curve, that on-ramp, honestly is pretty hard. And if you're familiar with Slack, for those of you who are, if you think about it, like we're asking people to pull down a lot of abstractions and transfer a lot of knowledge to a brand new system. Like what's a workspace? What's a channel? How do I organize channels? Like there is a lot for them to pick up on and do knowledge transfer. One thing about that UI refresh though is that it does actually help people get through that learning curve a lot faster. And that's one reason that we rushed it out to that cohort of people as soon as we could. So the questions that we got from people really weren't any different. And so we were able to just handle those pretty easily. I think the one difference though is kind of people weren't curious, they were in need. So usually people come to us, they're like, kind of thinking about Slack. It seems like it might help. Like, how might I do this? And we didn't get those questions. The questions we got were, I have to figure this out by this afternoon. How do I do it?
And along with that, are you giving them best practices that are more pertinent today than perhaps they were 6 months ago of, hey, to get set up, you need to do this. This is how you communicate with your teams. And these are the top 5 things that people are using right now.
Yeah, we're definitely talking about like Zoom and the other UC like video audio integrations right now, just because it is so handy to have one click to start a video chat. But in general, we've been trying to be more prescriptive about how to use our product well. Like I call it kind of like a Californian Canadian mentality that we've always had, where we're like, it's Slack, like you do you, man. It's here to do whatever you want. And that's like people actually need us to be more prescriptive. So we've been kind of leaning into that already, but we're really leaning into it now. Like, here are the ways that you can get this done. The one thing that I wish we kind of had the opportunity to tell more people about was like, take control of your own attention, take control of your own time. You don't have to be on Slack all the time. You don't have to answer everything right away. You don't have to keep up on channels. Like, think of it as an asynchronous tool, and your experience using it is going to be honestly much more pleasant, and it's going to help you manage your own time and attention much better.
We have a question from one of the listeners around
Mm-hmm.
balancing over communication, because we're all having to communicate with our customers
Mm-hmm.
in a different way, and with our employees for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
We are needing to over communicate, but how do you balance that with overwhelming them with all the updates that as a company we're experiencing?
So internally, so at Slack, we use what we call announcements channels. It's basically like, you must be in this channel, you're expected to read it. It will be
Okay.
extraordinarily high signal, low noise, like this is stuff you need to know. And you don't just kind of pop an announcement in there because you have one. Like, we think very deeply about what goes in there, from whom, what the cadence is, like what lines to bold to make sure that people get it. Like, these are highly curated channels that are intended to be really high signal for people. And one of the tricks there in terms of over communication is to just communicate once. Like, avoid the cascade, avoid the like, directors tell managers, managers tell me, like, just do it once, same voice all the time. And then you avoid a lot of that, like, gosh, I've seen the same information in like 10 different places. In terms of our customers, we've been pretty judicious about what we communicate. There's not a lot for us that we need to communicate to our entire customer base. So rather than pushing stuff out to our customers, like, we've taken advantage of media. We ran a PSA during, I think, nightly news a couple of weeks ago, and we're doing this in Europe now, telling people like, we are here if you need help. If you're a research team working on this, like, let us know, we've got your back. So we're really relying more on a pull model from people who need us rather than trying to push stuff out to customers.
A lot of the people who are listening today are both Zendesk and Slack customers.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe the Zendesk Slack integration?
So I'm an engineer by trade, and I wrote the first version, which was
I
exactly
didn't
what I
know
needed.
that, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. So it's way better now that somebody who's a proper engineer rewrote it. You guys actually rewrote it about 1.5 years ago. There are so many things that I could not do without it. Like, trying to remember what it was. So when you paste a link to a ticket into Slack, we'll actually unfurl that ticket for you. You can see who it came from, what the subject is, what its status is it new, open, pending, closed, and like the first chunk of what that ticket was. And there have been so many times, I'm trying to remember, there was one recently that I saw that came through, and I would have missed it entirely had it not unfurled. And I was like, oh my God, we can actually do something here, something related to this crisis. And I was like, we can actually do some, oh, I totally remember what it was. A woman wrote in and she said, like, can you please retweet something about getting a PPE to the UCSF ER doctors in San Francisco? They're really having a hard time. And so this went through the channel where we talk about tweets, and they pasted it in and it unfurled. And I just happened to know that we had 2,000 masks in our office stockpiled from the wildfires 2 years ago. And I was like, oh my God, like, let's get in touch with them and donate these masks. And so it's just this, like, the magic of this one Zendesk unfurl and the magic of kind of seeing what's going on in your support organization without going into Zendesk and hoping to find something. Like, the stuff that's interesting is the stuff that gets surfaced.
And it is boiling up to the top, and it's things that you
Yeah.
can press significantly faster, which actually raises another question. This one's coming in from Maggie, and it's around that customer sentiment. Are you seeing customer sentiment trends rising up to the top?
Yeah, it's really hard to say because there's just so much more like emotional undercurrent with what people are going through right now. I don't think we have a solid I don't think any of us as humans really have a solid emotional baseline right now. I know I've just noticed that everybody seems to have 1 or 2 days a week that just feel very bad for no perceptible reason.
Really hard. Yes.
Yeah, I haven't seen a significant change in sentiment in terms of like, I am happy or not, but I have seen a real big shift in gratitude. People are much more grateful to, have us support them than they have been in the past. Like, the previous thank you exclamation point has now turned into like, thank you so much, you totally saved me. And I think that's the big shift in sentiment that we've seen.
You brought up a very interesting point around, all of us having a rough day or two throughout the week.
Mm-hmm.
And I've absolutely caught myself doing that, where for
Mm-hmm.
no reason I'm just tired. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
take another Zoom call. I don't want to look
Mm-hmm.
at this box anymore. And maybe I don't want to Slack either.
Mm-hmm.
We've we're we're starting to feel fatigue with these
Yeah.
tools that we increasingly depend on and need and actually love. But how do you advise teams and people on fighting that fatigue with Slack?
I mentioned some of this earlier, but like really treat Slack as asynchronous. Take control of your time, and also extend that generosity to your coworkers. And there's a good kind of mental check, which is like, how urgent is this? And oftentimes, like we'll send a question to somebody. It's not urgent that we get an answer. And like, it's really important to kind of recognize just how few times in the day things actually matter. And when you recognize that about the things you're asking, you also kind of see that in the things you're being asked. Uh, we use Do Not Disturb. There's a feature in Slack called Do Not Disturb. It turns off your notifications. It tells everybody that your notifications are off. We use that pretty liberally to preserve focus.
Okay.
And like building that in as a cultural expectation, like it is okay for you to focus on your work is really, really great. Um, it's leave channels that you don't need to be in. It's okay. You can always join them later. I set aside some time to catch up on Slack now. And I also just kind of do it in the stolen 5 minutes, like when the meeting ends early or whatever. But part of it for me, I have always been terrible about boundaries. Like ever since I started working here 7 years ago, there has just been no solid boundary between Slack and my life. This is forcing me to put up that boundary. So like 5:30 p.m. laptop is closed. I do not open it. Like I do keep an eye on notifications on my phone.
Sure.
I do not open it unless something absolutely requires it. And last 3 weekends, no laptop. It's been pretty amazing.
That is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
You gave some really good pieces of advice right there. And what's that one go-to Slack trick that you have that is going to make my life and everyone else's life who doesn't know about that so much better?
So there's a feature called All Unreads. You'll find it on the upper left corner of your sidebar.
Okay.
Sort it scientifically. And what this does is it makes your own personal newspaper of everything that you need to catch up on, sorted by what we're pretty sure is most important to you. I've been using it for 3.5 years now as a way of catching up on Slack in the morning. It keeps you out of that kind of real-time motion of seeing stuff come into channels, and it gives you a much more static view of everything that's going on. And also, since with the scientific sort, you get to a point where you're like, nothing below this matters anymore. Like, I'll come back to it later. So this is how I catch up with Slack over coffee in the morning. It's just my half-hour newspaper of what's been going on. We're a global team, so a fair amount goes on, throughout the day. And it's just a nice way to kind of catch up.
I am going to start that tomorrow morning. Yeah. I like that.
Awesome.
We have time for one more question, and I think this is a really great place to end. A gentleman named Justin has jumped in and said, how do you know actually when something does require you to open your laptop? So a best practice. He, like a lot of people right now, are struggling with that balance of working at home and also trying to keep their life together. So what flags it? And then how do you also instruct your teams what not to bother you with?
So everybody can DM me with anything at any point in the day. Like, I'm responsible for managing my own notifications and my own attention. I can't expect somebody who works in Dublin to wait until it's convenient for me to DM me. So that's not it. There are two things. One is my team. So if somebody or the company, if somebody needs something from me urgently that only I can do or only I can do right then that's my responsibility. And it's my responsibility to help everybody around me get their work done. And this also extends to our customers as well. Like, I take this on myself, I enable other people's work. And then the other one is, it's just urgency. And oftentimes, my response is like, do you need this now or can I wait until Monday? And that's the quick check. Like, I don't assume that it needs to be done now. I ask if I don't know.
And you're not
Um,
dismissing either, which is
no,
really important. You're listening, but
yeah,
yet you're not reacting immediately.
yeah, and it's a genuine question, and part of that, like, the awkward thing about having titles like VP is that you have to be very explicit. Like, it is okay for you to ask, it is okay for you to DM, it is okay for you to say, yes, this is immediate. Like, you have to set out a lot of expectations about, like, yes, it is okay to rely on me, this is my job. I'm super, super proud of how not only our company, but how my department has shown up throughout all of this. And like, those behaviors get modeled throughout. It's just like, I can help you. Is this urgent? Let me do this for you. But so much of it, again, this is just communication. Like, let's understand what we need of one another and let's get it to one another in the time that works best for everybody.
I can help you. That's a great place for us to end. I want to
Yeah.
say thank you very much for taking the time to spend with us today. Uh,
Thanks for having me. It was great.
you fielded a ton of great questions, and we really appreciate the Slack stories that you shared as well. If you want to keep the conversation going, please connect with Zendesk and the rest of our community. And next week on a CX Moment, we're going to hear from Freshly. They are still delivering great customer experience, even with things like increased demand, more phone calls, more customer interactions, coupled with supply shortages and shipping challenges. And so we're going to have a really fantastic conversation with them. Until then, I want to say thank you, be well, and goodbye.